He walked through the thick crowds and linked his arms through his wife's and kissed her cheek. You were right there, 3 little monkeys. They did come some monkeys. What's all this with the cameras? Ron, I've no idea. They're interviewing 2 men. Mark, Gary and Christopher opened their satchels, taking out drawing pads, crayons and colouring pencils. They called a name out to the enclosure. What was that, Rose? I'm not sure. Sounded like Boris. Ron, look. The 4 capuchins turned towards the whites, one came over right over and pushed its arm through the enclosure towards the children. He couldn't reach, as the 3-foot-high fence was several feet from the enclosure. The monkeys started to get highly excited, reaching towards the children. The reporter interviewing Howard and Kevin stopped and looked over. What's going on over there with your monkeys? Not today, thought Kevin. Howard said, I have no idea. They walked towards the enclosure. The reporter said, cameras over here. Howard, it looks like they want the art materials. Howard agreed. Can you try? Kevin, can you ask the family? I don't know, sir. What if they think it's food? It will be detrimental to them. Kevin, I don't think so. Listen, think how crazy it's been lately. I don't know. I have a feeling about this. Well, Howard had a point. Kevin approached the whites. Excuse me, sir, and he went on to explain. Ron asked the children, who were willingly happy to oblige. Kevin entered the enclosure. The throng of the crowds had all gone quiet. The capuchins were also now quiet. Boris approached Kevin, gently took the drawing pad. Another reporter said to her film crew, film this now. He climbed up to the flat feeding board, chatted to the other capuchins. Seamus gently took the crayons from Kevin and passed them up to Boris. Boris lifted up the cover and folded it back. Christopher shouted, 1 + 1. Boris wrote the sum down, wrote equals and put the number 2. Gary shouted out, 1 + 2. Boris repeated same thing and then wrote equals 3. Mark shouted, a bird, Boris, a bird. Howard and Kevin looked at each other, then the child. How did this boy know his name? Boris drew a bird. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Rose shouted, a dog. Ron looked at his wife. Rose lifted her arms as if to say, I don't know. Poor Rose was crimson. She'd got rather caught up in the moment. Boris proceeded to draw a dog. The reporter said to Kevin, may we? Kevin walked over, put his hand up to Boris. Give, Boris. Boris gave him the drawing pad. Kevin stared open-mouthed. Let's see, a man shouted. Yes, come on. Kevin held it up for all to see. 2 sums written out with correct answers, and indeed a drawing of a bird and a dog. People started off quietly at first, but the clapping got louder and louder. Another news reporter approached the whites, asked if they could talk to the children. They asked if they knew the monkeys. The boys said no. The reporter asked how Mark knew the monkey's name. Ron's quick thinking answered that one. Well, it's here in the guide. The reporter said, well, how did he know that was Boris? Poor Ron and Rose, these were questions they had no answers to. Suddenly Ron said, well, I just think the children wanted to draw the monkeys, and the monkeys were asking for their art materials. You did hear them, didn't you? You did see them reaching through the cage. Mrs. White could not have been prouder of her husband right now. Oh, I see. Well, thank you. Howard approached Ron and Rose. May I reimburse you for your children's things? No, that's all right. Keep them. May I ask you, this behaviour, is that normal? Absolutely not. It's extraordinary behaviour. So they've never done this before? No, never. Excuse me, may I ask you a question, please? Yes, of course. Your son, how did he know Boris's name? Well, like I said in your guide. Yes, I know, Mr. White. Would you look again at the guide? Ron looked. Primates, capuchins, Petra and Coco. You see, Boris escaped. We printed new guides. So much has gone on, we haven't printed new ones. Come on, Ron, we have to go now. The two men shook hands, only Ron could not meet with Howard's eyes. Mark pulled on his father's arm. Can we see the other animals? Please, Daddy. Mark, Christopher and Gary said bye-bye monkeys and waved gleefully. Mighty Oak was going to be so pleased with them. As Howard turned, he glimpsed out the side of his eye the 4 capuchins were waving back. Only Seamus and Boris were looking rather sad. The reporter was thanking Kevin. Said they would have last talk to Howard and be off. Kevin didn't reply. He did not mean to be rude. He was just trying to process everything in his head. As the Whites got into the car, Rose inadvertently grabbed Ron's arm. Ron! She had just remembered that chattering noise she heard in the garden and thought she had heard before. She had on a television documentary about capuchin monkeys. What's the matter? Oh, sorry, nothing. Cramp. Rose, if I was driving... I know, sorry, you weren't. Well, you can't do that in a car. Ron didn't mean to snap. It had been a stressful day. He could not shake that dream out of his head. Ron and Rose barely spoke for the rest of the journey, reflecting on the day. Whereas the children had an amazing time, talking to all the animals along with all the other children. They were giggling, discussing their exciting day. The last of the film crews were packing up. It was late afternoon. Howard was in deep discussion with Kevin when a gentleman approached Howard. Excuse me, Howard? Howard turned. Oh, gosh, hello, he said, smiling, shaking his hand. Goodness, you travelled some miles. I, son, left 6:30 this morning. Is something wrong? May I talk to you in private? Of course. The two gentlemen stepped aside. Jed explained all about Seamus escaping, and that yesterday, when he saw on the news, he wondered. He knew it was a long shot, but had he escaped somehow to try and find Darcy? Howard agreed. He could see how he'd reach that conclusion. But that journey, it was too far. How could he have travelled from Scotland in such a short time? It seemed almost impossible. Howard also thought about the mimicking of Boris, but he decided not to mention that. Of course, you're welcome to, Jed. It will be nice for you to see Darcy again. The two men approached the enclosure. The 4 friends looked over at the men approaching them. Petra looked straight at Seamus. Jed's eyes filled with tears. Aye, lads, I know us Scots got a reputation, but to see these two together again, like this, aye, that's my Seamus, that's my bonny boy. Seamus and Petra came over. They put their hands out to Jed. Seamus had a sinking feeling. This was it. This was the moment he had dreaded. He knew it was going to happen. May I? Jed beckoned to the enclosure door. Of course. Kevin, can you open the door, please? Jed stepped in. Seamus, my boy. Hello, wee fella, and Darcy girl. The 2 capuchins sat on his shoulders. Seamus, what a journey you've had. Must have been so frightening for you. Seamus felt guilty, picturing him and Fred singing in the comfort of the van. You're a clever wee fella. Darcy, wee girl, we missed you. Howard called to Kevin. Oh, there you are. Draw up papers for Boris too. The gentleman will be taking him home. Kevin looked somewhat shocked, but can you do it, please? Seamus felt sick. His 3 friends were all in shock. They knew this day was coming, but were not prepared for now. Jed said, Stop, fella. Aye, that was me intention, leaving this morning. If this is Seamus, then I'll be bringing him home. But sometimes you love enough to know that you have to let go. To make this journey. No, I can't separate them again. If all right with you, Seamus has made his choice. I'll not be upsetting him. Petra leapt back to the branches. Seamus was so happy, yet also sad. He looked right into Jed's eyes, lovingly. He had never ever been cross or cruel. He was genuinely sad to say goodbye. Off you go, my boy. I'll visit you once a year, that I promise. Jed, there's a train station 5 minutes away. Jed laughed at this. I, Howard, think it'll be the train next time. The Major was so pleased he decided to stay on the mission. He had returned in the hope of finding out more, and my goodness, he had. He flew straight back to the mighty tree to deliver all the latest news. Jed was coming out of Howard's office. Well, that was kind of you, Howard. Not at all. I could not in all conscience not have paid you for Seamus as well. We will keep Seamus as his name. We were not sure what to name to give him. Listen, I appreciate this. I know it's a hard decision for you. Is that, lad, and I shall be told off when I get home to the wife. But it's a good thing that you're doing here, and he's amongst his own. 'Tis odd, though, a mystery. How he found Darcy, the trip. Incredible. Howard agreed. The two men stood silent for a while, just going over everything in their minds. They were lost in their thoughts. The silence was broken. Howard, there you are. Jed said, "Goodbye, Howard." Howard said his farewell, and don't forget, when you visit, free entry for you and your family. It will be noted in the ticket booths. The two men waved. Jed had a heavy heart, but he knew it was right, and now he had that long journey to figure out how he was going to explain to his wife.